How to overcome price objections in wholesaling. Guys, it's Rick Ginn. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 4 tips I use to handle price objections, and I'll show you how you can apply them to your deals so you can easily overcome the price objections when it comes to wholesaling. But before I get into it, do me a favor, make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can continue to receive videos just like this. So how to overcome price. Let's talk about the obvious. I'm going to give you step 1. And you have to understand, most of you are trying to overcome price objections from people you're not even supposed to be talking to you. So in step 1, we have to figure out is price really a legitimate objection? And the reality is most of the people that fight you on the price of a wholesale deal, in fact, are not even the right type of sellers you're meeting with. What do I mean? The reality is you have to find motivated sellers and or motivated houses. Now, in a perfect world, I have a motivated seller with a motivated house. And what do I mean by motivated? The seller has a pressing condition of why they have to sell their house. They put themselves in that situation. I want to help them out. And they've neglected the house and they haven't taken care of. And their worlds have collided and something has to happen. When that happens, they're really easy deals. But the fact is, most of you that are getting price objections is because you're talking to the wrong types of sellers. Tip number 2 within this number 1 section is you've got to deal with sellers with off-market properties. I'm sorry to tell you, but going on MLS and calling on every FSBO, anything that's on market, you're going to have an incredible amount of volume just to find one motivated seller or one motivated house. The reality is these people are trying to sell for top dollar. And for me to get a deep discount on someone that has their property sometimes listed 10, 15, 25% above the retail price means I have to ask for a 50% reduction off the price. And that's where I'm going to get kicked out the door. The reality is they shouldn't be on my radar. If it is on market or there is no sign of motivation, don't even worry about price because it's not a price objection. They're looking for a different type of buyer than a wholesaler. And if you know this up front, you can eliminate 95% of your price objections because you're talking to the wrong seller. Are you shocked that the realtor came back and asked you for more money? That's their job. So stop doing it. I'm not saying you can't do deals on MLS with realtors, but as a new wholesaler, if you want the most success, you need to find off-market properties with some form of motivation, either from the seller or the house or both, to have a realistic shot of being successful in wholesaling. Down the road, if you want to add that element to go after real estate agents or even go with on-market properties, you can do it, but you're going to have more skill sets because the reality is you don't know how to talk to realtors, you don't know how to talk to home sellers. And when you start reaching to the professionals level, they're going to shoot you down. And guess what? They're always going to want a higher price. So eliminate it. Find off-market properties with some sort of motivation. That is step 1. If you do that, you will eliminate 95% of your price objections. So let me give you an example. You guys ever deal with a seller who goes, listen, if the price is right, I'll sell you my property. How do you deal with that? Like, that's not even an objection. That's what I call the unicorn seller. And if you wait till the end of this video, I'll give you the best one line to deal with any unicorn seller. But I prefer you don't even deal with unicorn sellers, which leads me to step number 2. And step number 2 is all about your qualification process. You see, if you qualify sellers, you go through freewholesaling.com and figure out our MVP, you will find out if there's motivation from the seller or the house or both, and you'll be directed to the people you need to spend the most time with. And stop wasting your time with people that want tippy top dollar, want to go through a realtor and want to do all this stuff. And you act like you're struggling with these, but you shouldn't be dealing with them at all. In fact, the sooner you can disqualify people, the better you'll do in wholesaling. So we have a qualifying process. Might as well call it disqualifying. As I said, go to freewholesaling.com. I'll teach you in entirety for free on how to do this. And it all focuses on finding a motivated seller or a motivated house and then teach you how to follow up with them and get through it. Some of you just skip the qualifying process and try to make an offer on the house. If you're doing that, you're just being a realtor and you're not being a wholesaler, and you have to learn the art of truly being a wholesaler. So one of the parts within qualifying the seller is we teach you how to condition the seller. And conditioning the seller is basically setting up an upfront agreement that the seller is going to come to a yes or no decision. And if you don't do this part And if you skip this process, you will really get hung up on price objections, because if you don't qualify them, you get tons of price objections. Which leads me to step 3, which is this is really the defining moment. Me and Zach teach a method called Go for No. And this simply states that we want to get a no response on the first offer from the seller. I know what you're thinking, like, dude, Rick, I think you lost it. The reality is I figured this out after 4 or 5 years of wholesaling and constantly getting stuck with not getting the right price, offering too much. So I came up with a simple system. And here's how it goes. I want to know on the first offer. Like, I know you're thinking crazy, because you know why? Every realtor wants a yes on their first listing. By going for no, you can actually find out what the seller's bottom line number without actually asking them. And it's simply that simple. The reality is you have to learn how to build up a tremendous relationship with the seller, and you're going to build it up, and then you're going to do the go for no. So if the property's worth $220,000, I'm going to offer $110,000. Why? I want them to reject me, but I don't want to get kicked out or hung up on the phone. And usually they get a little bit upset when you do it, or they're like, yeah, I know this is going on, but what am I looking for? I'm looking for that counter. When you get a counter response, you are now negotiating, and that will save you a ton of time. And the reality, the number one problem with most wholesalers is they overpay for their first few wholesale deals. So I'm going to give you this tip, this trick, so you can prevent this problem. By going for no, it is painful and uncomfortable because you're not used to it. But if you get through this as a new wholesaler, you will get the most deep discounted property. Remember, I'm not looking for 100% yeses. In fact, very few people say yes to me, but when they say yes to me, I do very, very well. Why? Because remember, I can't make the seller sell me a property. I can only come to an agreement with them. And if the property has issues and they have a pressing timeline, they will take your offer as long as it makes sense to them. You solve a problem, you give them certainty, you give them speed, you give them convenience. That's how wholesaling works. And the reality is some of you chase what we call the maximum allowable offer. So if the property is worth 200 and you offer 175 and they reject you, what do? I don't know. You might as well leave because you got nowhere to go. So say that same person, you offer them 110,000. They go, are you crazy, Rick? I talked it over with the family and we say we can't take anything less than 145. I just saved you $30,000. And then you know how you cure any wholesaling business? If you buy property cheap enough, it's so easy to move it to a cash buyer. But the reality is a lot of you guys want yeses up front. And when you get a yes, you feel good temporarily. Yeah, I got a contract. And then you start going through your cash buyers list and the reality sets in. You paid too much for it. And what do you have to do? You have to go unwind your contract, ask for a reduction, and it's wildly uncomfortable. In the end, you don't make any money. So you're better off just having that uncomfortable conversation up front. Use the go for no. If you want to learn more how to do this, go over to freewholesaling.com. Not only will it save you time, it'll save you a ton of money. You'll actually become much more proficient than fellow wholesalers by using this technique, because you're looking for the unconscious response from your sellers without saying, what's the cheapest you'll sell me this property? So by using this method, it is highly effective and it saves a ton of time and aggravation. And most likely it will save you as a wholesaler. Trust me, this is the best way to do it. It's going to seem wildly uncomfortable, but this is how you become a great wholesaler. So step number 4 is what we call the trial closing method. And I want you to understand this goes on in any type of negotiations, no matter what it is. It could be real estate, it could be insurance, it could be kitchenware. I don't care what it is. And a trial closing means you just keep asking questions till you can get to a satisfactory answer. In trial closings, the idea is you test and then you try to close. And if it doesn't close, you go back and redirect. You try to find out what is the issue, what's holding them up, and you try to address it, and you try to make your sellers comfortable. So what I like to use at this point, when I'm at this point and we're stuck, maybe it's a few issues with the house, the closing date, the price, whatever. I'm basically going to use if-then statements. Mr. Seller, let me hear you correctly. And so by what if or if you use hypothetical situations, it takes the edge off the negotiations. Now, what I always want to do is redirect and find out what the seller truly wants to accomplish with this transaction. If you use your ears, like we teach you at freewholesaling.com, your seller will usually tell you, listen, I want to be out of the house by the end of next month, and I want to be in New Hampshire with my brother. So now that I have their emotional response to what they want, always use that as your lever. So Mr. Seller, I heard you clearly that you want to move up to New Hampshire, being your brother, by the end of next month. And I think that would be wonderful. And I believe we can accomplish that. But for me, in order to do that, here's what I think we can do. And if we can do this, I think we can move forward with it. And so I'm going to go in with that price reduction. But what I'll do is we can close it within 30 days. And then once I do this, everything's set in certainty. You know it's done. I'm going to come back. I'm going to take a look around the property with some of my workers. But that's going to give you exactly what you want to accomplish. If we can do that, can I go ahead and get your autograph today? Simple. And the last part of this I want you to say is whenever you negotiate with someone, a lot of times sellers will ask for basic things. And when a seller asks you for something, you should ask for something back in the exchange, especially when you're in your trial closing. So the seller goes, listen, can you close it in the next 40 days? If you can do that, I think I can make that adjustment. Here's what I'm going to do. Instead of just saying yes, which a lot of you do, go, Mr. Seller, I'm going to think in my head because this is, unfortunately, this is what we have to do. Mr. Seller, that's going to be tight for me. But I tell you what, if I can close it by the 40th day, and that's a big if, are you willing to go ahead and okay the contract right now? That's simple. You see, I want to do an exchange every time I do it. Maybe I'm going to exchange closing cost. Maybe it's the closing date. Maybe it's the inspection day. Heck, maybe even the deposit. But the reality is, if you're in a negotiation and you're doing a trial close using the what if statements, when the seller asks you for something, that's a great time to leverage getting them to sign the contract, getting them to get a price reduction or whatever it has to move forward. Because at that point, they're giving you a test trial closing back saying, if you can do this, I might be able to move forward. So ask for something in exchange, because if you don't, you are not running the negotiations. The negotiations are running you, and you have to be in charge. Remember, your job is to guide your seller down that lead funnel to get them to a signed contract. You can't make them do it. You can only reassure them and give them the certainty they want. Most people that work with a wholesaler, they just want certainty. They want their dignity, and they want the convenience and speed of a wholesale transaction. So give it to them. So the trial close, this is where I enjoy. It's one of my favorite places in wholesaling to be, because you're getting down to the nitty gritty and it's fun. And this is the part, if you problem solve, this is where you make most of your money in wholesaling. So I'm going to give you a bonus tip here. So I told you 4, I'm going to give you 5. The art of detachment. You have to learn this in any sales process. I know I say that wholesaling is not sales, but the process of detachment is important. It is no different than dating a person, chasing down a deal, buying a car at a car dealership. The more detached you are to the transaction and the outcome to it, usually the better you'll do. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we get so eager, especially as a new wholesaler, I got to get this thing under contract. You can put anything under contract. So if you tell your mind, I got to put it under contract, I got to put it under contract, it doesn't mean it's a profitable situation. So here's what happens when you negotiate with anyone. If one party is too eager, more eager than the other one, they're usually going to lose. And this drives me crazy in wholesaling, but sometimes you do have to wait people out. And how do you do this? Use the art of detachment. There is a certain number you can't go past. And when a price objection comes up, if you've gone through every phase we've got to this point, this is where detachment can take over. What do I mean by this? You've got to be willing to walk away. You can walk back into the transaction anytime you want, but once you get out to your final negotiation number, hold to it. Because if you chase them, their number's just going to go up and you're going to be in a predicament. And by doing detachment, you create an energy amongst your sellers and they feel it. Don't ask me how. I don't even understand how this works. I can always sense when someone's more eager to buy or sell something. And I will always use that as leverage in any type of sales process. Wholesaling is no different. The reality is I want all my deals bad, but on the outside, I'm cool and calm. I go, I get it. It just doesn't work for me at that number. And if we can do this number, I can probably move forward today. But if not, I have some other properties to look at. And that's just how I handle it. You have to have the art of detachment, because if you chase people too much, your energy sends out a vibe into the world and they sense you're way too urgent and they feel like they're being taken advantage of. And that's the last feeling you ever want to give a seller. Remember, it is ultimately up to them what they're going to sell your house for, how big their problem is, and how urgent their timeline is. All you can do is reassure them, walk them through the process, and come up with a fair negotiation. In the end, you have to have a win-win situation when it's said and done. I've never had a transaction where I made a ton of money and then the seller got crushed or vice versa, because nobody feels good at the end of the day on that. I want to solve problems and I want to walk around with held high. And how do I do that? I want to create win-win situations. So the best way you can do is communicate to your sellers and walk through this process. Use these 5 tips I gave you. I know I told you 4, but I gave you 5. And if you do that, you can overcome any price objections. Now, I told you at the end, I would say if you have that crazy seller, I call the unicorn seller that wants like $1 million and the house is like terrible. And usually here's a simple line, and a fellow investor taught me this. And I usually go like this: when somebody wants $1 million for a house, but they really need to sell the house, but they're so disconnected, say that I need $500,000 to fund my mom's retirement account. I said, Mr. Seller, I tell you what, let's take a look at the house and see what it can afford. What I want to do is redirect them back to the asset of the house, because I can't solve all their financial problems with this. And guys, I get a lot of people like this, but if you go through the qualification process and you get that unicorn, use this line: let's see how much the house can afford. And you're basically telling them, I go, dude, I can't take care of you financially. I'm just looking here to buy the house. And if it works, great. If not, then you got to go find some other sucker. It ain't going to be me. So guys, when you have that unicorn seller, use this line. It always stops them in their track. And they're like, yeah, I kind of get it. And most of the time I don't do deals with people like that. But if you go through this process, you avoid the people you're not supposed to be talking to that aren't motivated. You avoid the non-motivated owners, the ones that are on market with realtors and everything else. That is not a great place to start. The next thing you want to do is make sure you qualify them, because if you qualify them, you can get rid of all the tire kickers and do that, and you don't have to negotiate with those people. And then step number 3 is going to use the go for no. Why? Because it's highly efficient and it works. Step number 4 is simply using what we call the trial close. And then step number 5 is learning the art of detachment. Guys, if you use these tips, you can pretty much overcome any type of price objection, because when it comes to the end, if you find the right type of people and you're marketing the right type of people, price usually is not the final objection. It's usually going to be some sort of terms or timing, and you're well prepared to do that. To learn how to overcome all objections in wholesaling, go over to freewholesaling.com. Me and Zach will teach you for free on not only how to get your first deal, but how to get you to first 100 grand. Guys, let me know which one of these techniques you're going to use in your wholesaling business. And as usual, if you got value from this video, do me a favor, smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. This is Rick Ginn, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.